Hello, everybody, and welcome to Perfectly Frank Conversations. I'm your host, Frank Clark, and my guest today is Sean Brawley. Say hello, Sean.
Hey there.
How are you?
I'm good.
Tripped
It's
over
good
my
to be
tongue there
with
for
you
a
again,
second.
Frank.
Nice to be with you. Thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate having you.
My pleasure.
So, Sean is a master coach and the only certified inner game coach in the world, certified directly by Tim Galloway. Sean worked very closely with Tim for many years in helping him develop his brand around the inner game. You may have heard of him from the inner game of golf, the inner game of tennis, the inner game of skiing. So Tim Galloway was writing these books back, I think, in the 70s, wasn't it, Sean?
Yep, the tennis book came out in 1972, I believe.
72. So Sean was a professional tennis player on the pro tour, went to college at USC, right? And then following his tennis career, went into coaching, got fascinated by the inner game, and developed almost like a mentorship with Tim, and has gone on to become a master coach in his own right. His coaching clients have included people like Pete Carroll, who's now the head coach for the Seattle Seahawks. They won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. He's worked with other professional sports teams such as the Yankees, the Padres, the Mariners. He's worked with major Fortune 500 and well-known companies such as GE, Creative Artists Agency, Dave & Buster's, U.S. Bank, and a whole bunch more as well. You can learn more about Sean on his website at seanbrawley.com, and I'm delighted to have him here as my guest. So thanks.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to, have you kind of like just tell people how you kind of got. It's a great story. I mean, how you ended up going into tennis. First of all, how you started playing. First started playing tennis, and what made you gravitate toward tennis.
Well, I started playing tennis when I was 8. I grew up in New Orleans, and my family moved to California, where it was sunny all the time. And it's one of those cliche stories. I picked up a racket, went down 2 blocks to the club with my new best friend, and we started battling on the back court where no one could see us. And after about 5 weeks, my dad saw me and couldn't believe how good we both had gotten without any instructions, after 5 weeks. And I just, from the moment I picked up the racket, I was very passionate about tennis, and it's really carried me through, my whole life. And it's been a real joy to have as part of my life.
Fantastic. So now, as a dad, you've got your own 7-year-old at home. Have you started teaching him to play tennis as well?
Yeah, of course. He's not as passionate about it as I am. He likes all sports, but yeah, usually in the summer when I get him out on the court.
Great. And you still do teach tennis from time to time, private coaching lessons and so forth, right?
I do. I really enjoy it. Last summer, I taught quite a bit for the first time in about 5 years, and but I usually work with people on the phone and here and there, just as needs arise. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoy coaching quite a bit.
So, what was it like for you being on the pro circuit, playing tennis at such a high level with and who were some of the professionals that you played with when you were a professional tennis player?
I was on the tour from 82 to 85 for about 3 years, and I got ranked in the top 150 in the world in singles and doubles. So
that's fantastic.
I definitely learned something about the process of mastery, long-term development, and sustainable high performance. I had my share of the roller coaster ride of performance as a player, and that's actually part of what really spurred me on afterwards to really understand how the mind affects physical and skill and development and performance, and why do we play so well one day and so poorly the next. And so I really was an important experience in many respects. And I played against McEnroe's partner, Peter Fleming, Mats Wilander, Yvonne Lendl. They were all around my time frame.
Nice.
And there's a number of top players that I played against that I'm almost sure nobody would have heard of. They were like ranked in the top 10, but they're not household names. But it was great. It was a great experience.
And it obviously you got to travel all over the world playing tennis, right?
I did.
Wimbledon and U.S. Open and places like that.
I did, yes.
What was it like? I mean, it must have been almost like surreal. I mean, for people who haven't played professional sports at that high a level. I mean, just hanging out with people like, on the tour, like Lendl or McEnroe or his partner that you mentioned. What was that like as a 22-year-old?
I grew up playing it, so I just thought about this the other day. I had kind of visions, like starting in around even, I think it was 4th or 5th grade. There was always these cards that would come around, and they would talk about careers, and of course, as you got older and in high school, the career day where you talked about what you were, exploring what you might do when you were older. I already knew what I was going to do. I mean, I was just there. I have to tell you that there's really nothing better in life than to wake up every single morning and absolutely be passionate about doing something, be very clear about what you're going to be doing that day, and know you're going to love it, even if it's tough. Like, not every day practicing was like the happiest day in the world, but at the end of the day, it was meaningful, fulfilling, and it was in the context of really wanting to be my best and to get better so I could kick ass against all those friends of mine that were like, we're all competing against each other, and there really isn't anything better that I know of. And I just feel really lucky because all my friends that played tennis, they got off the tour, and I was really unhappy for a few years after I got off the tour. And all my friends said, you're going to have to get used to this. You're never going to find anything that's going to be as fulfilling and enjoyable as playing tennis for a living.
Right.
And I feel lucky because I really love what I do now. I love that whole process of learning the inner game and how the mind affects learning, performance, and enjoyment of what we do. I've really dived into it. I've had a number of unbelievable teachers. I've learned way more than I've ever thought possible. It's kind of like seeing a curtain way down there, and it takes a long time to get to the curtain, and then you to have the opportunity to peel back the curtain and then to go, oh my God, like, really? That's what's going on? Like, I had no idea. And it's just been extraordinary. And then to have not only learn about it intellectually, but to really deepen my experience of it, it's really impacted my coaching. My coaching, for instance, is completely different now than it was 6 years ago. And I was a pretty damn good coach 6 years ago.
Right.
And so, just to be involved in the process, I think is so crucial for anybody that is wanting to be successful in whatever activity, really being involved in it and learning about yourself as you go is just so critical. So I feel very fortunate, Frank.
It's a great metaphor too for entrepreneurs and executives in business, as we're going to talk about in a little bit here, which is you've always got to be working on continuous improvement, not just on your business but also on yourself. We had a blab here yesterday with a gentleman that you know pretty well, actually, Tim Askew, who's the author of The Poetry of Small Business. And we got to talking about how the entrepreneurial journey, when you dive into it and really dive into it, inevitably becomes a journey of self-transformation transformation and self-discovery and growth. So I love what you're saying about how, you know, even 6 years ago, you were a pretty damn good coach, but where you've come from there and how much you've grown in the last 6 years, because I know you well now, that you're always working to improve your game, to make yourself a little bit better in different areas. You're reading, you're going to seminars and workshops, and then you're out there doing it. You're practicing your craft. So
I am, Frank, what I call a living laboratory.
I love that.
And
That's great.
It's fantastic. It really is.
You try it all out on yourself first, and then you find the stuff that works the best, and then bring that to your clients.
Yeah, and what I love being in sports and business, because it cross-pollinates.
Right.
It absolutely cross-pollinates. I learn something in sports, I bring it to the corporate world, and I see, you know, then something, I coach a leader in the corporate world, and something comes up, and I bring it into sports. It's really great. So what do you think, Frank, I'm curious, what do you think that entrepreneurs and executives listening really want to know? Like, what can we talk about that would be of substance for them?
So I think what would be a great place to start would be, let's define what is sustainable high performance and how does that differ from peak performance? Because I think that's an area that a lot of people are confused about or may not understand what we mean by sustainable high performance. And I know you have a very specific definition and differentiation.
Yeah, I do. Like I said, as a tennis player, I was, peak performance was even, kind of born out of my time frame in the 80s. And the idea was to train in such a way that you would peak your performance for really special events.
Like
the other way it was used was just to describe that experience when you're in the zone. So like you may not have even planned on it, but you just happened to, through the grace of the moment, you end up just playing the absolute best that you can possibly play. It feels ecstatic. The tennis ball is like a grapefruit. Things slow down. You have total trust in your capabilities. Most people have had that experience, according to the research, and it's exquisite. And it's a peak experience. It also, unlike I'm not like other mental toughness or mental performance coaches. Anytime I see a mental performance coach say, do my program and you can, get into the zone at will, I think, well, if that were really true, you'd be a billionaire. And, but what we can do, Frank, is we can train in such a way aspects of the zone experience so that we prepare ourselves and give ourselves a much better chance for grace to visit us. And how this is peak performance, in my opinion, is different from sustainable performance arose out of a conversation with Pete Carroll. So I've been in the process already as a tennis player. I had met Tim Galway and was already very proficient at the inner game and really had become a very good coach. And on the first meeting with Pete Carroll in 2001, and I asked him, so, how can I help you? What kind of help? This was a year before he got the job at USC, and about a year and a half after he had gotten fired from the Patriots. As you know, he'd been fired from the New York Jets before that.
Yeah, I'm a big Jet.
So he really had an epiphany that he was going to probably only have one more chance at a head coaching job, and so he wanted to be ultra prepared and really clearly know why he was the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, because it was all intuitive. He could do it, but he didn't know why, and then also, why did he get fired? Like, what were the elements involved in the factors? Because he didn't know. He had no clue.
And I think that's an important point that is for any entrepreneur or business person or anybody really that's like trying to grow and improve themselves with a business. is like you need to take the time to unpack like why things happen, like what were you doing, and begin to do like a self-evaluation examination. Because if you don't, begin to understand what's creating like consistent patterns of mistakes, how are you ever going to make things better, right?
Yeah. So in that very first meeting, I asked him how I can help, and he said, I want help clarifying my coaching philosophy, and he told me why. And I said, well, why don't we start now? And so he said, well, I said, tell me your philosophy about achieving peak performance. And he said, well, the first thing I want you to know is I don't believe in peak performance. And I was like shocked. Like I'd never heard anybody say that ever before. And really, I still remember the moment. It was like it hit me, and it was like it really provoked my thinking. And I said, well, tell me more about that. I mean, and he said, well, there's a lot of things you can do to achieve peak performance, but what I want for my team and my players is to play normal. I want them to play at a very high, consistent level that they feel is normal and well within their capabilities. And if through practice, if I can get them to improve slowly over time, then that normal of theirs will keep getting better and better. And then you, of course, have this upward trajectory. And he was onto something there. And after that, I discovered that there was a lot of material and research that a man named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi had done in flow, which had actually just come out like a couple of years before. And so, what Pete had latched onto was this idea that that your mindset, that a big problem that people have when they're performing, or when they're starting a company, or when they're speaking in front of people, or in a number of different situations, they try too hard. They try to perform better than they're actually able to perform. That causes tightening of the body. It causes attachment to outcome. It usually triggers the stress response and anxiety, and so performance suffers. So what Mihaly and Pete, in his own experience, was starting to discover was that instead of trying to play your best, like, don't try to play your best. Try to play normal, and let your normal be good enough.
Right.
And if you can do that on a consistent basis and train that to improve your normal, you will have much better results because you won't be trying so hard. And you can see that. And the other thing that was fascinating was, and I've never checked this myself, but what I recalled him telling me was that the first team that scores in the playoffs and the Super Bowl wins something like 87% of the time. That the first score is so crucial because it gives that team the edge, and the other team gets just enough deflated that they start to try harder. And you can actually see that in the Super Bowl win that they had. When in 2014, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, 13.
Peyton Manning came out and tried too hard, and he didn't settle down and play normal until the third quarter, and it was too late.
Right.
And Pete also, part of his philosophy is also, you don't have to win the Super Bowl every time. His goal is just basically to make the playoffs every year. And then, like, from there, let nature or let fate take its course. That you put yourself in a position to have an opportunity, and you take it from there. Because he said, when you're talking about performance in competitive games like a playoff or a Super Bowl, you have no idea. There's so many things you're not in control of. You cannot let winning, the Super Bowl every year be your main target, because there's so many things you're not in control of, and so that'll drive you crazy and also make you try too hard.
So let me ask you this question, because I know you also worked with the New York Yankees, and that is their goal, is to win the World Series every year. Did you see that reflected in them trying too hard when you were working with the Yankees, because their goal is to win the World Series every year?
Well, I think the results speak for themselves. I mean, they had a good run for a few years, and then they had arguably the best players in the league and couldn't win. So it speaks more towards what Pete said, is they put themselves in a position to win, until there was I don't remember the exact years and everything, but they were in the playoffs every year.
2001 or 2003, really, where they had a run where they made the playoffs like every year, and they made the World Series like 6 or 7 times in that span.
Yeah, so you can see this
like 10 years.
And I think one of the main things, though, is what Pete embarked on was how to become consciously aware of what you're doing that is working and effective, and really making sure you're aware of that. And if you're not, you need to become aware of that so that you can keep doing it, because under pressure, we all forget. We all have our blind spots. We all get distracted. But if we're consciously aware of the critical factors in business, it would be the business drivers. I just recently coached a friend of mine who is spending a lot of time and activities that were generating followers on Facebook. And then I asked him, well, how's your income doing? And he said, well, it could be better. And I said, well, so how much time are you putting in, onto Facebook and other activities to generate followers? And it was like 80% of the time he wasn't spending time on income driving activities. With Dave & Buster's, one of their highest profit items is the arcade games, and they sell cards that can be used for the arcade games. And there are a number of restaurants that don't put a lot of focus and effort or marketing into the arcade business, because the other business is going pretty well. But with a little focus and a little attention, I've been working with them for just a few months, but already the results for those stores are naturally improved.
Right.
Naturally, it's a big profit item. It's easy to sell. It's they weren't focusing on it. So you put attention to anything and it grows.
Exactly. And I love that, I was going to ask you, like, how do you help people discover their blind spots and correct their blind spots?
Well, that's a good question, and that's not always easy. Especially, that's one of the things that on the phone I find very difficult, to be honest with you. And one of the things I love about sports is I can see almost everything. I can see it. Like for instance, I can differentiate. I'm really good with body language now. I can see if somebody is attached to getting the ball in and having performance anxiety. I can see the difference in their body language if they're if they're perceiving the ball as a threat, to one side. So I can see stuff that they may not be able to see. I can also see their talent. I can see their potential. And then it's just a matter of trying to discover, well, how are they getting in the way of this talent that I can already see? So they don't have to learn anything new, Frank. They don't have to actually get any technical instructions for me. I can see it, but they're not able to execute. And it's usually because there's something going on with their inner game. And that's also part of sustainable high performance. So Pete was actually very aware of how players could get in their own way. So he would make sure he'd tell them, don't try to play your best. Just play normal. This isn't a big game. This isn't a big game. Even Super Bowl, this isn't a big game. Or fourth quarter, 5 minutes left, tie ball game. He's telling them, oh my God. I mean, I've heard this so many times. Oh my God, you guys, this is so awesome. This is why you play the game. Wow, 5 minutes, tie ball game. It's in your hands. This is extraordinary. This is so much fun. And, it's like that attitude just puts them at ease. Doesn't allow for them to get all nervous and, be all worried about the outcome. They're just all excited for the moment. And he'd even say, take a look at the crowd. Look, listen, this is why you play the game. Don't ever forget this moment. And so they love that. Right.
I love it. And we've talked about this, like with parents who are coaching kids or watching their kids play sports, let's say in Little League and in soccer or football, whatever it might be. And I've had this conversation with my partners. They do so much damage unknowingly with their kids because they're saying, oh, you should have moved your arm this way, or you should have run this way, or you should have done the pass, or you should have done this, you should have done that. And what they're doing is they're forcing the kid to like examine their faults and their failures and their weaknesses and making them feel bad about their performance. Whereas grandparents, when they'll come out and watch the game, whatever it was, the Little League, the soccer, the football game, or whatever, they say 6 words that make all the difference. And that's why kids love to have grandma and grandpa come to watch them, because they'll just say 6 words when they see them. And these make all the difference, which is, I love to watch you play. I love to watch you play. It's great. I love to watch you play. Glad you're having fun. I love to watch you play. And that's one of the hardest lessons for parents, because you want the best for your kids. But if you just tell them, I love to watch you play, like you're saying Pete Carroll does with the Seattle Seahawks and with his players at USC, et cetera, it gets their mind off of like, oh, I did this wrong, I did that wrong. And instead of, you're like, yeah, I'm playing, I'm having fun. And it gets you back into the moment.
Well, there's two things. One I just saw like a couple of weeks ago somebody posted it on Facebook, and it said, if a flower isn't growing, you don't blame the flower, you change the environment. And the other is, I lost my train of thought. What was, the other is, I think coaches need, and parents too, but coaches, I'll just stick with coaches. Coaches need to take the coach's Hippocratic oath, do no harm. Yeah. They have to, as a coach or as a parent, you really need to check and look, like, how is the impact of what you're saying and the impact of the environment that you set up. And if it's conducive to learning and, performance and getting better and having fun, or is it getting in the way?
Very well said. And yeah, environment is kind of like the foundational base for everything else that comes, because off of environment, your environment changes what you believe, what your values become, what you become capable, and who you think you are as an identity, and what you believe your purpose to be. If you're in a horrible environment, if you've got a bad coach or a bad manager or boss or what have you, you're not going to thrive there, because you're always going to feel threatened, and you're going to be worried about avoiding mistakes rather than trying to like move the ball forward, either literally or metaphorically, right?
Very well said.
Thanks. And I heard a great quote, which is related to this in the business context, which is, most people don't quit their jobs or their companies. They quit their bosses, because the boss is setting a bad environment.
Absolutely.
So Tom is asking, will you be taking any questions? Happy to take questions, guys. If you want to ask a question of Sean, please type in the chat box /Q space followed by your question, and we'll see if we can get that into Sean. So /Q space and type your question. So you mentioned, identifying blind spots with sports and how tough it is sometimes where you can see the ball. But in a business setting, in an entrepreneurial setting, or working with executives, what kinds of things are you looking for, or what types of approaches are you using to identify blind spots? Because you can't see them react to the ball, right? You're not seeing them in a sales situation even.
Yeah, it's true, but it's just more difficult when I can't see them on the phone. But this is where 360 instruments can help. And also, based on all the personal work I've done, it is difficult. But after a couple of sessions, if they're honest with me about what they're actually struggling with, it's funny because in general, the factors that are important for sustainable high performance are actually just a few. There's only a handful, really. The laundry list of what we do to get in the way of those factors is pretty extensive. That being said, one of the benefits I have of working in sports and business and being with a group of people that are really committed to their growth is that there actually are only a handful of ways that people get in their own way most of the time. So when somebody has a blind spot, somebody has a blind spot, you have to be very careful with it, though, because usually there's a reason that it's a blind spot. So you have to be careful with it. You can't just go bulldozing through somebody's blind spot and say, "Oh, look, I see you're doing this. You're not seeing it." Oh, you have to, treat it with care.
Right.
And basically, I just help people become more aware on their own. I get them to reactivate and regenerate their natural learning system, the root of which is to be more self-aware and to get feedback from their own experience. So, for instance, I was referred last year to a leader who, and this is very common, I'm using this example because I've been referred to a number of leaders who have this problem. It's in business, it's very common for someone to be very successful and have developed a number of skills where they're focused on the goal, they're task oriented, they get things done, they overcome obstacles, and that focus is kind of one pointed and clear and that away to the future. And that is a completely different kind of focus of attention than when you put it on other people. And you actually notice the impact in the moment of your behavior, of what you say on the other person. There's so many people that I've worked with, leaders and managers, who are very successful and they don't understand why they don't have good relationships and are not able to build trust with the people that they're leading or managing. And usually this is the root cause. So you could have them do all these different things, but if you don't change their focusing attention on this other person and really noticing the impact of what they just said, nothing really changes in the long term. So that's what I work with. I work with root causes and and basic processes, because focus of attention is really the key. It's the hidden driver of excellence in everything that we do. And when you understand how it works and how we get in the way of it, it actually becomes very easy to help people.
So again, just like in sports, where success is really predicated on mastering the fundamentals, business, what you're saying is also just a few fundamentals that will guide you to sustainable high performance. So there's a few critical factors that if you just focus on those critical factors, those fundamentals, then you will be better able to develop, a sustainable high level of performance.
So just to be clear, and I'll use two examples, one from sports, and actually I'll use three, one from sports and two from business so that it's clear. Focusing on what is critical is the foundational skill needed to be successful in your learning, your performance, and your enjoyment. And in tennis, the tennis ball is the most important thing. If somebody isn't watching the ball, and now we know that their brain has got, that there's two places, maybe this is more information than people want to hear, or I don't know. But in tennis, people see the ball, but they don't always track the ball or read the ball. And it turns out there's a reason for that. That reading the ball or tracking the ball, a moving ball object through space, occurs in the parietal lobe of the brain and is a skill that can be developed. None of us really need to develop the skill of seeing a ball. And in tennis, people can go, oh, look at the lovely ball coming, and not move for it because they haven't developed the skill of reading the ball, which is what is necessary to initiate movement to the ball.
So that's reading the tennis, ball is you're referring to, like, velocity, angle, direction, spin.
Those are aspects. Those are critical aspects of the ball that you could pay attention to. But the primary thing is the ball itself. And so in tennis, when I help people develop the skill and improve the skill of tracking the ball, everything changes. Because if they're picking up the ball after the ball has crossed the net, that's pretty late. So what happens is their experience is feeling rushed and anxious. They move slower to the ball. They don't get to the ball in time, so their balance and footwork is off. So if they're off balance when they're hitting the ball, it's very difficult to have a good solid contact with the ball. And over time, this becomes habitualized. So how this relates to business is I was coaching a very senior leader of GE over in Europe, and he had 2 years of 12% decline in his sales. And after a coaching workshop, I was coaching him personally, and he was like, I don't know what to do. And I first said, well, that's a good place to be in. That means you're going to be a little more open to what we can do. And I said, what are the top 4 most critical activities that you could do that would drive sales, do you think? And first answer, I still remember, was, well, I don't have enough time. I said, okay, let's do it at the exercise anyway. So he came up with 3 of them. One of them was to coach his salespeople. Another was to go out on sales calls with them and observe how they're doing it and to assist in the sales process. And a third was he still had lots of people that he had done business with in the past that he could personally call himself, essentially selling himself. And I said, so you've got a lot of fires you're putting out, a lot of activities you're doing. Give me a sense, how much time are you spending on each of these 3, which you've identified as the 3 most important activities? He said, right now, none.
Right.
So I didn't know that for him that those would be the most important, but I could ask the question. But as soon as he started putting his attention on those 3 areas of and activities, and I kind of got him, it took a while. It was hard to believe that if he didn't put out that fire and instead went out on a sales call with his salesperson, that was more important. As Steve Covey says, a lot of times we get attracted to the urgent, even if it's not important.
Right, exactly.
So within 3 months, this is 2 years of suffering this guy went through. And after 3 months, everything had turned around. He had a positive 22% increase in sales. Things were going well. And so this is a turnaround story, but I worked for Union Bank for a short time after the tennis tour, and someone who I worked with there ended up becoming the vice chairman of the commercial side for U.S. Bank. And U.S. Bank was the only large bank in the United States that didn't take any money whatsoever from the federal government. They were solid. Why were they solid? I asked my friend Joe, how did you achieve that? That's pretty remarkable considering everyone else. He said, well, actually, it's actually pretty simple. Everybody knows what I'm going to tell you. They just weren't doing it. That's the key. Everybody pretty much knows what they need to do, Frank. They just don't do it for a variety of reasons.
Right. And all of those banks, when they were underwriting those loans, they were doing it because they were following a faulty incentive structure, and they knew that they were making bad loans. They were going, they kept loosening their underwriting criteria year after year because they were chasing the easy money by flipping their portfolios to the Wall Street banks. So they threw kind of good business sense out the window. But what you're saying is U.S. Bank did not do that. They chose to stick to their knitting and lend money just to people that they knew could repay the money.
Yeah. So in banking, he said there were 5 critical factors, and one of them is profit. One of them is loan quality. There's several others. And what the other banks were doing was putting all the emphasis on profit.
With loan quality going out the window.
With U.S. Bank, there was an equal balanced focus and value placed on loan quality, which every other banker in the world knows. I went through a training program. That's like one of the main #1 things you learn under credit is, all these risk factors, making sure you have good loan quality.
Creditworthiness of the borrower. It's the #1 criteria.
So U.S. Bank had something like, 3% loan loss reserves, and everybody else had like 12% or something like that, and it put them in jeopardy. So and this works with everything. If you focus on what's important, everything changes. Okay.
Absolutely.
So
do you have an example from something maybe more? Have you worked with like an entrepreneurial setting with like a let's say a CEO or a CFO?
Yeah, I've worked with a handful of entrepreneurs over the last few years. The big issue with entrepreneurs, in my opinion, just based on admittedly a limited experience, but I'm an entrepreneur myself. And even though I've had my business for 20 years, I feel like because of how there's been 2 crashes, it seems like there have been 2 times when I've been poised to have my very best year ever, where I can actually move to, hiring people and all that. And there have been 2 crashes. One was the computer, the internet crash of 2000. And then the second was the financial crisis of 2008. So I don't mind admitting that, based on external factors, I feel like I've had to start over a few times. So I feel like I'm a serial entrepreneur in the same business.
Right.
So the main issue, I think,
Tom, would you mind jumping in real quick? If you could just jump on the call real quick and open up a seat for you.
Should I finish or not?
Yeah, because I'm sorry. I just have to step away for one moment. So I'm just going to ask Tom to hold the space and keep the conversation going. I apologize. So Tom Martin is my new co-host on Wednesdays at noon, and also knows Sean well.
Looking good, Tom.
I just woke up. Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
I'm sorry. Be back in one minute.
All right.
No problem. No, I was listening. You were saying, so as you call yourself a serial entrepreneur, so you had those 2 unexpected things in the midst of it all, right?
Well, and so one of the big issues with the entrepreneur, I think, is again about focus, because the entrepreneur is in a situation where they pretty much often have to do everything themselves. So it's really difficult just by the very nature of having, I'm a single dad. So there are times when, I have a certain number of hours I've got to spend with my child. That doesn't help me grow my business. I have to write checks and do my checking, balance my checkbook. And so if you're a single person and you've got to do everything, it's really tough to focus enough quality attention on those activities that are crucial for growing the business. And like the other example I gave, I think what happens quite often is they get a little sidetracked and they forget to focus enough attention and enough time on activities that will actually create revenue, and to understand really clearly what's the low-hanging fruit. What activities are really for long term. So I actually went through that a few years ago. It was really helpful to identify what the sales process is 9 months long. So if I'm going to go for the corporate client, this is how long I should expect before I can see some results. So how much time and energy should I put into that versus other activities that I know I can do that can create, almost within a month or two.
Sure.
So you guys are both entrepreneurs. What do you think about that? We've never talked about this. I'm curious what you think.
Well, personally, I can definitely relate to the importance of time management and focus management. Those are both areas I've been focusing on, if that's not an oxymoron or whatever. But I guess I'm curious if there are things that entrepreneurs and solopreneurs like us can do to sort of have a self-check or something like that. I understand the value of working with a coach because, like you said, you can spot when somebody is not doing something quite right. You're not going to jump in and start, dictating anything to them, but you can observe it. But it's kind of hard to observe yourself, or maybe I'm wrong.
Well,
but
if I might interject, my take on it is when you're an entrepreneur, okay, and you're first starting out, yes, you've got to do a lot of different things. You got to wear a lot of hats. Even when you're growing your business, you still need to wear a lot of hats, okay, if you're growing like a larger company. And as soon as you can, you need to build a team, okay, where you can delegate your least productive or least favored tasks. So if you don't like doing the books, the accounting, for example, a lot of entrepreneurs dread doing the books. It's just time-consuming and it's not fun. Find somebody you can delegate that to. Get a bookkeeper, get an accountant, get somebody online, get a virtual assistant. As soon as you can afford to do that, because not only will it take care of something that you don't like doing anyway, but it frees up that time for you to focus on, your sweet spot. So if your sweet spot is like getting new clients, you're the rainmaker for your business. Like you were saying, Sean, you need to spend 80% of your time making rain, right? And delegate what you don't want to do. So get somebody to handle HR issues, get somebody to handle accounting, bookkeeping issues, get somebody to handle, even, marketing, branding and things as you outsource. Now, when you're a solopreneur, those can be, sometimes they can be technologies, something like to manage your social media, you can get like a Hootsuite, for example, and that can shorten the amount of time that you've got to spend on marketing. But the sooner you can delegate the stuff that's not in your sweet spot and return to your focus, the faster you're going to grow and accelerate your business. That's my take.
Makes sense. I don't know if it's an unrelated question or, sort of a parallel question, but you mentioned the executive who knew the 4 things he needed to do or that would produce revenue, but he wasn't doing them. He had a team. He was not a solopreneur, but he still had a team. So he benefited from a coach, obviously, because he brought you in. But for those for people who have a team, it still seems to me that it's kind of hard to see yourself, but maybe that's just the way.
Absolutely. I think, you can focus on blind spots, and sometimes those, are the performance killers. But most often, here, I just would love everybody to take two things away. That one is from today's interview. One is we already know what to do. We don't do what we know.
Right.
And one of the main reasons that we don't do what we know is there's two reasons. One is we get distracted very easily. Our brain is a butterfly brain or a hummingbird brain. It's a whoop, what?
Shiny object, let's call it.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
It's going from flower to flower, and so we have to learn to be disciplined. Otherwise, it's really easy to get interested and attracted by things that aren't important for a variety of reasons. And the other thing is afraid. So, for instance, I've been following a guy. So for those people on the call, if you're solopreneurs, I highly recommend going to the website actionplan.com. I've been following this guy for 12 years. Unfortunately, at this moment, I forgot his name. Actionplan.com.
I just typed it in the chat for everybody.
After working with people for many, many years, and he's been telling everybody there's like 7 things that they need to do to market their business. And after like so many years, he finally did a workshop he actually called it, inappropriately, the inner game of marketing, because he said, you guys know what to do. You're not doing any of these 7 activities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or you're not doing them on a regular basis, like a farmer. You have to farm. You have to plant the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are afraid. They're afraid of rejection. They're afraid. There's a lot of different fears and self-doubt that comes up that tend to make people want to do those activities that are more comfortable and don't challenge them or get close to some wounds that we might have around, how we feel about each other.
Right. So again, I'll remind people, if you've got a question for Sean, please type /Q space and ask your question. But I want to give an opportunity, Sean, for people to find out more about you. So how would people get in touch with you to contact you and learn more about your services? Oh, we lost them. There you are. Can you hear me? Oh, no sound. I can't hear you. Try to refresh maybe, or check your cord. Your sound went away. Test. No sound. All right, guys, I'm going to post Sean's chat here. He's going to refresh and try and come back in. I'm sorry, I'm going to post Sean's website here. So if you go to www.seanbrawley.com, you can learn more about Sean. No sound? All right, so is there something else you can try? I can't hear you. All right, guys, I apologize. Sean is having some technical challenges. So I think this was a fantastic interview. I want to say thank you so much to our guest, Sean Brawley, for coming on today. I'm going to close it out. Thank you very much, Tom Martin, for coming on as well and joining. I appreciate you stepping up and stepping in for me while I had to step away for a second there. And great to see you, Sean. Always a pleasure. Hope it was a fun experience for you, but I'm going to pause the recording now and say goodbye. If you can stay on with me for a second. But thank you, everybody, for watching live, and anybody who's watching the replay. Again, I'm Frank Clark. This is Perfectly Frank Conversations. Our guest today was Master Coach Sean Brawley. Thanks, Sean.